There are, good morning. I think there are four people that I can't see whether they've partaken yet or not. So I might be moving too fast. But anyway, if we can find in our Bibles this morning, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, the 12th chapter in 1 Corinthians. Last week, we began a brand new sermon series entitled Unwrapping Your Spiritual Gift. Michael brought this series to my attention a month or so ago, and I was thinking about how would I kick off the new year, and I thought, well, we just opened Christmas gifts. How about opening spiritual gifts? And I want us to open them one at a time. Fran put together for us a card. Hopefully you every Sunday remember to bring that card and have it with you. All 24 of the gifts that we're going to unwrap one at a time are on this card. We're not going to open them in any particular order. If you don't mind, I'm gonna begin by opening my favorite gifts, and since I'm doing the teaching, indulge me with the privilege of choosing which ones I want to begin with. How many here have either on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, by a show of hands, you open up Christmas gifts with family? Do you open them one at a time, or is it a free-for-all? If you're anything like our home, we open them one at a time, and everybody looks at the person opening them and to see what they received. And you know, when my sister opens up a bottle of perfume, I find no good in that gift. She finds good in the gift, but I don't find any good in the gift. It's not going to benefit me. I'm not going to call her and say, hey, can I borrow a splash? But these gifts that we're opening one at a time, I want us to not look at them like we do Christmas gifts. Look at verse 7. 1 Corinthians 12, verse 7, but to each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit. Now watch this, for the common good. When someone opens up the gift of mercy in this series, unlike a Christmas gift, when someone opens up the gift of mercy, I want everyone to know that was for your good. That was for your good collectively, corporately, the common good. It's not like my sister's bottle of perfume when we open up these gifts. In other words, when someone discovers their gift, somebody has the gift of giving, someone has the gift of mercy, someone has the gift of faith. You know what I want you to be thinking when one of our people in our church discovers, hey, that's me, that's my gift. I want the rest of us to say, that's for me. Now, they may have opened it. They may have discovered it, but that was for you. God gave them the gift for you. Now, you may have noticed in verse 7, it says, but to each one. Nobody's going to be left out in this series. No one's going to be left out. Everyone has a gift to open. And this morning, I want to begin by opening, for selfish reasons, my favorite gift out of the 24. This gift is my favorite gift out of the 24. I hope and pray by lesson's end, it becomes your favorite gift. Look at verse 28, and you'll find my favorite gift. And God has appointed in the church first apostles. There's a thing called the gift of apostles. Second, prophets. There's the gift of prophets. Third, teachers. There's a gift called teaching. Then miracles. Then gifts of healings, helps, administrations, various kinds of tongues. Pastor Campo wants to unwrap his favorite gift, And it's found in that verse, verse 28. Now, I bet you someone is thinking, I know what Pastor Campos' favorite gift is. He wants to unwrap the gift of teaching. Because he's made it abundantly clear throughout all the years we've known him, he loves to teach. And by the way, that's how you know when it's your gift. You will absolutely love enjoying the privilege of using that gift. But that's not my favorite gift in verse 28. My favorite gift in verse 28, are you ready? The gift of helps. The gift of helps. And here is why. Here's what we're going to learn in this 24 to 36 week series on the spiritual gifts. Here's what we're going to learn. Every gift, I don't care what your gift is. You may have the gift of mercy. You may have the gift of giving. You might have the gift of faith. You might have the gift of teaching. I don't care what your gift is. Do you know what you're going to need one of these days? Help. You're going to need help in the utilization of your gift. Everyone is going to need help. And I want to prove that this morning. Last week, I shared my approach to unwrapping these gifts one at a time. It's a three-pronged approach to unwrapping them. As we unwrap them, we want these three prongs in every lesson. Number one, we want to name the gift. That's what the card that Fran put together does. She put 24 gifts on a card. You know what all 24 gifts do? They name them. No one's in the dark. No one's wondering, well, what do we call this gift? Well, it's called the gift of service. It's called the gift of teaching. It's called the gift of encouragement or the gift of exhortation. Those are the names. Then number two, once we've determined the name, we want to define the word that the name is. If it's called the gift of helps, we want to know what does God mean by the word help or helps or helping. And then number three, here's what we want. We want to look to the scriptures and we want to find real life, flesh, tangible, verifiable examples of that gift in operation. Oh, so that's what that gift in operation looks like. Now I get it. And what is the objective? Well, after naming it, defining it, and giving us examples, here's what that ought to do. It ought to cause every one of us to look inward and say, Pastor Campos describing me. Fran, after learning the name, the definition, the example, she could say, he just described my brother Bob to a T. Bob can say, that's Lorne. Because how did we begin last week? The Corinthians were unaware. They didn't know. They didn't understand. You and I have a responsibility, listen, of helping each other understand. Helping each other. So let's begin with the definition of the Greek word used in verse 28 for help. Help, helps, helping. It comes from a Greek compound. In other words, two Greek words brought together to make up one word. The compound begins with the Greek word anti. Anti means instead of or in place of. Lempses or lambano. Lempses or lambano means hand. Do you see what the gift of helps is? In the simplest terms, the gift of helps is lending a helping hand. Lending a helping hand. You need a hand with that? You ever meet people like that? You need a hand with that? I'll be glad to help you with that. And that's really what the gift of helps is. It's assessing that someone cannot do it alone. And so you go out of your way to help them. You say, help them with what? It don't matter. The person with the gift of helps is just always looking to help. They may not even have a specialty in whatever the help need is. They're just the kind of people that are always there to help. Always. Now, who needs help? Listen to these two verses. 1 Thessalonians 5 and 14. We urge you, brethren, admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted. Listen, help the weak. Help the weak. Acts 20 and 35. Paul to the Ephesian elders said, in everything I showed you, that by working hard in this manner, you must help the weak. Now look, do you know what the weak need in life? A helping hand. When somebody is weak in something, you know what that means? They just can't go it alone. They can't do it alone. They're weak. And whatever the issue is not the issue. The issue is you're the kind of person that when you see a need, you just can't help but say, can I give you a hand with that? Why are you good at fixing electrical problems? No, not really, but I know somebody who does. I know somebody who can. See, you may not be able to help directly, but because you have the gift of helps, you might be able to help indirectly. You're the kind of person that's going to get on the phone. You're going to call your plumbing friend, your electrician friend. You're going to call your so-and-so friend. Somebody specializes in whatever. You know that person, and you just want to help. That's you. That's you. I don't care which one of the 24 gifts belong to you. Trust me. There's going to come a day when you're going to need a helping hand. Now, what if I told you the strong are sometimes weak? So when Paul says twice, help the weak, I don't want you to only have weak people in mind. I don't want you to always think of Pastor Campo. You know, how many know Pastor Campo's a needy person? A needy person. I need help, right? And Jonathan came to the rescue this morning. And he helped, and he knew exactly where for me to click and where for me to turn and type this in here and type that in over there. And next thing you know, I'm up and running. He made it seem so simple. But to me, I'm going to tell you something. At 10:57 this morning, I had a lot of anxiety. I felt very weak. I'm supposed to start church in 3 minutes and I can't get on. You know what I needed this morning at 10:57? I needed help. I needed help. Thank you, brother. Thank you, Jonathan, for helping this morning. But listen, sometimes the strong need help. Who do we know to be one of the strongest people in the Older Testament? Listen to what Acts 7 and 22 says. Moses was educated in all the learning of the Egyptians, and he was a strong man. Moses was a strong man. There's no Jew in the Older Testament that the Jewish people look up to more than Moses. Moses is their hero. Moses is their deliverer. Moses was the one that God used to defeat the enemies of Israel. But how many know even the strong can be weak? Let me prove it to you. Listen to Exodus 4 and 10. Then Moses said to the Lord, please, Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither recently nor in time past, nor since you have spoken to your servant, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. You know what this strong man was weak in? Lips. Weak lips. Weak lips. Do you know what God did for this strong man with weak lips? He gave him help. But listen to how he helped him. Exodus 7 and 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, see, I make you as God to Pharaoh. Oh, did you hear that? I make you as God to Pharaoh, In other words, I'm going to make you strong in the eyes of Pharaoh. But listen to what he then said. And your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. Your brother Aaron shall be my prophet, God said? No. God said, I'm going to make Aaron your prophet, Moses. What do prophets do? They what? They speak. What was Moses weak in? Speaking. What did God do? He sent him help. And so Aaron is an example of help for a strong man. Do you recall in Exodus 17 when Israel was winning the war? Listen to this, Exodus 17, 11, and 12. So it came about when Moses held his hand up. What does the word help mean in Greek? A helping hand. So it came about when Moses held his hand up that Israel prevailed. And when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy. Then they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other. Thus his hands were steady until sunset, one on one side and one on the other, and they won the war. Do you know what Aaron and Hur were for Moses? Literally, a helping hand. A helping hand. So you see, it's not just the weak that need help. Sometimes the strong need help. I'm speaking to people with pride this morning. No, that's okay. I don't need your help. You know they need your help. No, I don't need any help. I can do this. I can do this by myself. No, you can't. No, you can't. You need help. You need help. Even the strong need a helping hand. Now, who by reputation is one of the strongest believers we know in the Newer Testament? How many would agree with me? One of the strongest New Testament believers is a man by the name of Paul. I mean, when you think about what he endured and yet he persevered, Paul. Listen to what they say about Paul by reputation. 2 Corinthians 10 and 10, for they say his letters are weighty and strong, but his personal presence is unimpressive and his speech contemptible. Historians tell us Paul was not a good-looking guy. His presence unimpressive and his speech contemptible. In other words, he wasn't a great orator, but he was strong in the scriptures. But you know what he needed? Paul needed help. Turn with me to Romans chapter 16. Romans 16. Are we all there? Romans 16. Look at verses 1 and 2. Romans 16, 1 and 2. I commend to you our sister Phoebe, who is a servant of the church, which is at Cenchrea, that you receive her in the Lord in a manner worthy of the saints, and that you help her in whatever she may have need of you. For she herself has also been a helper of many and of myself as well. What gift are we beginning to unwrap first? The gift of helps. What word is found twice in the two verses just read? Help and helper. Have you ever wondered how Paul's epistles were delivered to the churches to which he was writing? You know of these letters called the prison epistles? Paul's in prison. You ever wonder how those epistles made their way to the churches? You know, they didn't have Federal Express in those days. They didn't have fax machines in those days. They didn't have email in those days. How did those letters get to their destination? Paul would write a letter. Here's what he would do. He would write a letter, and then he would ask someone for help. Hey, I just wrote this letter. It's called the Book of Romans. Phoebe, I need your help. Can you please go from Rome, or from Corinth rather, where I am? Paul's in Corinth when he writes the book of Romans. And he says to Phoebe, he says, Phoebe, I need your help. Well, sure, Paul, what do you need? Well, I need you to go 617 miles to Rome and deliver this letter. 617 miles. Did I mention no airplanes? No gas-driven cars that you could drive 70, 80 miles an hour down a highway. I want you to tell me something. If somebody said to you, I got a Christmas card. I need to get it to Fran. Would you deliver it to Fran for me? Now I'm asking you, right? How many of you would say, put a stamp on it and stick it in a mailbox? Don't bother me with such mundane things. Not Phoebe. Phoebe goes 617 miles. Did you see that Paul said that she's a helper of many? And he told them in this letter, receive her. Did you see that in the verses we read? Receive her. Why receive her? She's coming. She's coming from Corinth to Rome. I just wrote this letter. She didn't write it, did she? Who wrote the letter at the Roman letter? Paul did. But Paul couldn't deliver it. Phoebe did. Without Paul, now listen, without God, let's back up. Without God, there is no Roman letter. Without Paul, nobody's writing that letter. Because remember, all these letters that are written by men. They're inspired by God. God moves man to write it. Here, Paul, put this here, put this word here, and verbatim, Paul writes what he's inspired to write. But how many know if Phoebe doesn't travel 617 miles, they never read what church historians refer to as the Magna Carta of our faith, the Constitution of Christianity. Church scholars throughout the centuries have said the most important New Testament letter. Now, look, they're all important, but when people are forced to pick one letter in the New Testament and say, well, which one do you think is the most important? They always say the book of Romans. It's the Magna Carta, the Constitution of Christianity. Here's a woman we know nothing else about. We don't know anything else about this woman other than these two verses. She's mentioned only here in the New Testament. Remember what I said earlier? No matter what your spiritual gift is, there's coming a day when you're going to need help. You know, Paul the Apostle has many spiritual gifts. He's got the gift of apostle. He's got the gift of prophet. He's got the gift of healing. He's got the gift of teacher. He's got the gift of pastor. He's got the gift of evangelist. And we can go on and on. He's got a whole slew of spiritual gifts. But do you know what Paul needed? Help. He needed help. That's the whole point of the gift of helps. What? Helpers enable others to use their spiritual gifts. How important is this gift? Well, I'm going to show you how important this gift was to Paul. Begin with me in verse 3. Look at Romans 16, verse 3. Greet Prisca and Aquila. Look at verse 5. Find the name Epaenetus. Look at verse 6. Find the name Mary. Drop down to verse 7. Find the name Andronicus, Junius. Look at verse 8. Find the name Ampliatus. Look at verse 9. Find the name Urbanus, Stachys. Look at verse 10. Find the name Apelles, Aristobulus. Look at verse 11. Find the name Herodian, Narcissus. Look at verse 12. Find the name Tryphena, Tryphosa, Persis. Look at verse 13. Find the name Rufus. Find the names in verse 14. Asyncritus, Phlegon, Hermas, Patrobas, Hermas. Look at verse 15. Find the name Philologus, Julia, Nereus, Olympus. Whole lot of names, right? Whole lot of names in chapter 16. What name did Paul begin with in verse 1? Phoebe. If you want to know how important the gift of helps is, look at what name was mentioned first. Phoebe. I believe we have before us a good example of a person with the gift of helps. Now look, all believers at one time or another will demonstrate a gift. That doesn't mean they have that gift, right? How is she described as helping in verse 2? She's the helper of a few. They have in verse 2 that she's the helper of many. Do we have that? In other words, she's known for helping a whole lot of people. By the way, that's how you know your spiritual gift. You use it often. You're not a oncer. You didn't show the gift of mercy in 1989, and you haven't shown it since. Or you were a very generous person to a very poor person in 1997, but you haven't been very generous since. You clearly don't have the gift of giving. You have an episode where you gave, but when you have a gift and you utilize that gift, it is known by many. It is known by many. Paul stresses how important this gift is in verse 2. How should they receive her in verse 2? As somebody who is what? Worthy. Worthy. You know what worthy has to do with? Worth. Let me ask you a question. What is the gift of helps worth? Answer. What's the book of Romans worth? This woman went 617 miles to help me. Listen, and to help you, Church at Rome, and to help you, Living Word Bible Church. In other words, any church that believes in a Bible, the Bible we believe in, and when they open up to the book of Romans now, they're going to have a whole different mindset when they open it. They're going to realize that book didn't get in my Bible easily. That book got into my Bible because it needed some help. It needed somebody with the gift of help. You know, helps is not a glamorous gift. It's not a showy gift. How many here have ever gone to a Moody Bible Institute Founders Week? Anyone here ever go to Founders Week at Moody Bible Institute? Can I tell you what panel of speakers they've never invited? They've never invited people with the gift of helps to speak. Now they invite people with the gift of teaching to help or to teach. I mean, everybody they invite to preach and teach has the gift of teaching. But they've never assembled a panel of people that they're just known for helping. And they're going to talk about helping. It's not a glamorous gift. Your neighborhood Christian bookstores probably have no best-selling authors on their shelves with this gift. I love what one man has written. Listen to what a man wrote. The ministry of helps is just as important to God as the ministry of pastor. Praise God, he said, for the Christians who have been faithful in holding another man's coat. Praise God for women like Phoebe, who enabled this apostle to deliver this letter. Apostles need help. Pastor teachers need help. Those with the gift of leadership or administration need help. You name the gift, we can't make it without help. You know, the gift of helps is a lot like housework. Raise your hand if you do the housework in your home. Raise the hand. The gift of helps is a lot like housework in this regard. You don't notice it as much until the housework is left undone. Then all of a sudden you appreciate housework. If people didn't help, can you have that thought in your mind? If people didn't help, I want you to think about that. What if there were no helpers in the church? You know, there's no such thing as the gift of secretary. But I know of a lady by the name of Fran. And for nearly 20 years, she has been a tremendous help to me. But you know what? She's been a tremendous help to you. There's no such thing as the gift of bookkeeper. But we got Bob Nemeth. We got Bob Nemeth. And boy, does he micromanage his algorithms. There's no such thing as the gift of video. And there's Lorne. He gets to church 35 to 40 minutes before everyone else does. He lugs his equipment into the back of his vehicle, unloads it, assembles all the tables and chairs every Sunday for us before we arrive. He assembles the equipment. I want you to imagine a church with no help. What if this gift did not exist? What if I just proved to you how you can know a helper. A person with the gift of helps in areas of need. They see a need. I'll do it. Do you think Lorne loves doing what he does? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But they help. Because that's what a helper does. They lend a helping hand. Because there are weak scenarios in our lives. Weak means what? I can't do it alone. I couldn't get Zoom installed on my computer this morning alone. I needed Jonathan. I needed help. I don't mean to single out just a handful of people, because a lot of people in our church help. I remember in the other church, came one night, the church, sat in my office. I heard noises in the sanctuary. It was Greg Krusek chipping away all the paint off the old windows, getting ready to repaint them. And it was a tedious task. And if you know anything about Greg Krusek, when Greg Krusek does something, it's always done top shelf. There's no shortcuts in something that Greg does. When Greg does something, nobody can do it better. Bob Maestri is like that. Bob Maestri has been a tremendous help to the saints of God on many levels, many times. Peter Sebular, gonna buy me a Highlander. Patty's laughing, Peter's not. What if this gift did not exist? Or how about if somebody's like Timothy? Remember Timothy from last week? Remember what Paul told him? Do not neglect your spiritual gift. Imagine you have the gift of help. Imagine the church knows you have the gift of help and you start neglecting the help. All of a sudden, the books are in shambles. Bob Nemeth stops. All of a sudden, the person who puts together all the names of all the donations throughout the year, and they're going to provide you with your list of contributions for the year, not going to do that anymore. And now you need to do your income tax. But the person who, Fran, who puts that together, she's not going to do it anymore. She's going to neglect helping. What I'm trying to get us to realize is this gift is huge until the housework is left undone. It's only until the housework is left undone. In 1 Corinthians 12 and 23, listen to what Paul says. And those members of the body which we deem less honorable, on these we bestow more abundant honor. And our less presentable members become much more presentable. Do you know who gets all the glory in churches? The pastor, the teacher. Oh, come to our church and listen to our pastor teach. When was the last time somebody said something like this? Come to our church. We got a lot of helpers. Why don't we do that? Because if you read what I just read, and those members, listen, and those members of the body which we deem less honorable. In other words, we don't make a big deal out of Lorne. We don't make a big deal out of Fran. We don't make a big deal out of Bob Nemeth. So on and so forth. We don't make a big deal out of these people who do things behind the scenes. Do you see why I began with this gift? Because out of all the gifts, the one that we least make a big deal out of are people who help. They just help. You need a hand? You never realize just how precious help is until help is gone. I want to conclude with a quote. Listen to what one writer once said. There's no such thing as a self-made Christian. Whoever you are or whatever you have accomplished for good and for God, would you remember you needed help? And would you also remember those members of the body which we deem less honorable? On these we bestow more abundant honor, and our less presentable members become much more presentable. That's a word from the Lord this morning. Did you know? Remember last week I said I'm going to ask this question repeatedly. Did you know? And I said I was going to ask that question because Paul said, I don't want you to be unaware, Corinthians, about what? Spiritual gifts. Did you know that the gift of helps in everything? In everything. Amen and amen. You can unmute.